Welcome to the latest season of the Engineering Success Podcast. This season, we're zeroing in on resource allocation and investment distribution, key areas that can make or break the effectiveness of our engineering teams. In today's episode, we are sitting down with Nathan from ProcurePro to discuss how to build long-term productivity in engineering teams.
What has been your origin story? How did you get into building this?
I guess similar to you, I've got like a great pivot in my background as well. I guess when I graduated uni, I got into a startup here in Australia that does engineering drawing management. And I loved the startup space, the fast pace, like the quick growth and the closeness you can get with the customer was just really great. And I spent a few years cutting my teeth in that business, but at some point I wanted to do it myself and get like even closer to the customer and I guess take on a little bit more of that risk. And that opportunity came up when our CEO, he was a commercial real estate lawyer and he had the classic startup moment where he's at work being a lawyer and it's like, this is too hard. There has to be a better way. And then, he just went into a startup accelerator with this idea on how to automate a lot of the contract negotiation process. And he validated his idea really well. He had some customers lined up. He just needed technical founders to build the product. So he came across me and one of my friends from my last job as well, Tom. And we jumped ship at that point and joined as technical founders. We added a UX designer onto our founding team as well. And we just started from nothing and built like a full product to negotiate real estate contracts. But similar to your story around having the unit economics just not really stacking up, like the amount of money that people want to pay to negotiate a single contract is quite low. So you have to get a lot of volume in that to make it stack up. But then we're just starting to see the uptick happening and then COVID hits and all the commercial real estate places are just like on lockdown essentially because no one's going to shopping centers or strip malls or anything when there's a lockdown. So that kind of really put the brakes on at that point. But it just so happened that at that point in time, we were already investigating other verticals to sell our negotiation product into. We were looking around at other SaaS companies and construction companies and just like anyone that negotiates large volumes of contracts, because that's where our platform really shined, is when you have the same contract that you're negotiating lots of times, you can put a bit of artificial intelligence behind that and be like, oh, last time someone asked for this change, you said this, do you want to say that again? That sort of thing. We started to see a similar problem in the construction space. Every construction company we talked to was like, this is great, I love this, but negotiation's not really our problem. Our problem is procurement. Like we just struggle to get our subcontractors on site, find the right subcontractor and get them on site and keep our prices under budget so we can actually make a profit. Because I didn't realize this when I first started, but the construction industry has like razor thin margins, like particularly like the commercial construction industry, people that build like schools, hospitals, residential towers, hotels, they're operating on like 1% and 2% margins and they're building like multi-million-dollar buildings.
I would have never thought about it. It always felt that real estate had a lot of money because you meet these real estate people and they're all in a certain way.
Yeah, I think like residential buildings generally have a slightly higher markup on them, but like in the commercial building space where like you're building like really massive buildings and they're still making a large dollar figure of profit, but when you put like a $1 million profit against a $100 million building, like it's not really that much, right? You're taking on a lot of risk to make that happen. And all it takes is a couple of issues that raise along the way and it cuts into that margin and all of a sudden you're not really making any money off of it. So we started to like look into this subcontractor procurement problem space and we realized that it was completely different from our old product, our negotiation platform. We just threw it all away and started from scratch again with a brand new product. But this time we had our whole product process and our team was like ready to go. We had 3 years of practice on like how do you build and ship product fast. And we only had a small team. There was five founders and one other software engineer at the time. And we were like, all right, let's just go at this as hard as we can. So I think we with like less than 12 months, I think after that point, we'd launched with our first few customers in the construction space. And yeah, that's how we ended up here today. Like it was pretty quick growth from that point. We went from years of no growth with the previous product and like really struggling. And once you hit that, like I've actually got product market fit now, and it's crazy because people are just trying to grab the product out of your hands as fast as you can. And we're like, we don't have enough employees to manage this. And now our problem is not how fast we can build products, but how quickly we can hire people so that we can build the product.
That's a good problem to have. The moment you start facing this problem, we're understaffed.
Definitely. That's how you know that it's working well.
So then how's the team structured now? How many engineers, or what does your engineering team look like these days?
Yeah, over the whole business, I think we're just about to hit 50 people. Out of that, we've got 10 engineers, not including myself and Tom as the founding engineers, but we don't really write that much code anymore either. Almost all of them are like senior engineers, so we've skewed senior, and we've got a couple of mid-levels as well, and a DevOps engineer as well to keep the infrastructure up and update that. But something we've been working towards this year is integrating our engineers closer with product and design as well. So we've always had a really strong product focus and design focus to make sure that we've got a really clear and really smooth user experience as well. So we've split the team into 3 product squads, where each product squad has a designer and a product manager to get that really close alignment and collaboration, cross-functional team dynamic. And we're finding that's paying dividends. We did that split at the start of the year, and it's going really so far. Whereas last year we had separate silos of like product comes up with the idea, handballs it off to design, figures it out, and they spend ages trying to figure out exactly how it all works. And then all the time you have to loop back to the other teams before you to clarify things and whatnot. And it just didn't really work as smoothly as it should have. It worked really well in the early days when there was only a couple of us, but in hindsight, it was because you're always working really closely with those people anyway. Even though it was still like big upfront design and you handball it off, we're still like every single day checking in with design and product and dev all the time. But as those teams grow, it starts to become like unmaintainable to have everybody checking in with everybody else ad hoc and have that like actually work as a process.
But that's the startup story, right? Like initially you start with, it's all confusion, it's all everywhere. And then now you start setting up those processes. So Nathan, how has your previous experience into engineering and working with engineering teams has helped you here? Firstly, did it really help? Or how did you really figure it out?
Oh, I think definitely like being an engineer has definitely helped as I move into a more leadership role. Like it's easier to put yourself in the engineer's shoes. It's hard to tell someone what it is they should be doing or what they should be focusing on if you've never been in that spot yourself. So like actually being able to understand how they feel and feel empathy with them allows you to, I think, lead them better as well. But yeah, I think the biggest part is just the drive that I have to do a good job and deliver a good product, and surrounding myself with engineers that have a similar drive. They can see that in me, and everyone wants to do a good job. When I was an engineer, I never liked it when someone told me you have to cut the corner, do like a shitty job in this regard. You can come back after the sprint, you can fix it next sprint, and you never could fix it next sprint. You're always shipping subpar code, and it just makes you feel gross inside. A big thing for me is you hire people that have the drive to do a good job and then give them the space to do a good job. And it's all about setting the guardrails and the boundaries around, if we need to get this out fast, let's build a smaller version of it. Instead of cutting corners, let's cut the scope so that you can still do a good job on a smaller scope, if that makes sense.
Because you're operating with a lean team, there's always this conflict between stabilizing what we have built, working on the operational stability of, and then also constantly innovating or keeping up adding new features as the product evolves or the customer requirements. So how have you balanced that? Are there any management tactics? Okay, let's not call it tactics, but things that you do to really keep those things alive?
I guess from a technical perspective, one of the things we did really early on was throw out the whole startup mantra of just ship as fast as you can and move fast, break things. That's just like the whole concept of just shitty code into production. And then if it breaks, you can fix it later because you'll have money to fix it then. We've always had this idea that the only constant in startups is change. Like you can guarantee that I'm going to ship some code today and next month something's going to change in the market or my ideas or my understanding. That means I'm going to have to change that code. So if that code is a mess, it's going to make me go slower next month. So if I architect it at least well now and put a good job in now, it allows me to maintain that constant velocity in the long term because the code is in a nice structured way with the right guardrails and tooling in place as well. So it's meant that in the early days, we were able to move fast. Even as the code base grew and as the team grew, we can still maintain that velocity. You don't get that flattening out of the curve as people start having to deal with things like technical debt and bugs in production and that sort of thing. Not to say that we're the land of milk and honey or anything like that. We still have bugs and technical debt, but I think we have a lot less of it than a lot of places, particularly early stage startups, which then allows you to keep moving fast. We're not spending days and days dealing with the production. We're able to put effort into structuring new things. And I think that pays dividends, right? If I'm trying to just keep the lights on today, that means the thing that I'm working on, I can put the effort in to make sure I do it right. So then it doesn't catch fire tomorrow as well. And you don't end up in that like never ending death spiral of just like fighting to keep the lights on every single day.
I think this is a great lesson for people who would be watching this or listening to this podcast, that velocity is not always the right measure.
Yeah. The clearest example for me is you write some code today and then you're like, I really should write tests for this code. I want to make sure that it still works. I'll do it next week. I just have to get this code into production now. And then something else comes up, and it's 2 weeks later. And then there's a massive breaking bug in production and it like takes the system down. And you probably would have caught that if you had a test like 2 weeks ago. And it would have only taken you like a couple of hours to write that extra test. And you probably wouldn't be in this situation. And I've had that just too many times that I leaned very heavily on the static analysis and testing methodologies and that sort of thing to set guardrails around what it is that you build so to make it easier to change in the future. If something's got tests, I feel so much more comfortable jumping in and changing it however I want, because I know there's a bunch of tests which are essentially specifications for what it needs to do. If I break those tests, then I've broken something and I can fix them.
I'm pretty sure there would have been times where you had to rapidly scale or do things where you did have to ship faster or maybe deliver faster. In those instances, how have you managed to keep the team going?
Yeah, I think generally we always try to cut scope, not corners, if that makes sense. So if you've got a big feature that needs to be done, it needs to be done soon, and you're like, I don't think I can get it done. Let's take some features out until we can get it done. And the funny thing is, you've always got that like deadline pressure in a startup. It's always has to be shipped yesterday. In reality, it probably doesn't. Most deadlines can slip and it's fine. You want deadlines to have that sense of urgency and to get to the market as soon as you can. But unless you've really promised it to a customer, then it's probably not that important. It can probably get pushed out a couple of days to be delivered. But at the end of the day, the main thing that you're trying to do is cut the scope down so that you can deliver a good version of a small product, right? Like users are always more happy if they get half of what they asked for, but that half works really well, as opposed to they get what they asked for, but at every second time they click on the page, it gets an error or it just doesn't actually solve the problem that they want. Very common in startup land, and like you deliver a feature to a customer and they're like, oh, that's not really what I wanted. It is what I said, but it's not what I wanted. And that whole kind of like agile methodology of you do the first little bit and then you get a bit more of a steer and you end up in a completely different place than like what you thought you were going to at the start.
So how do you, again, following up on that. So here we're talking about everything being done with a certain pace and things, leaving room for anything that could go wrong or anywhere something needs to happen. We have room to. So in all of this, how do you look at the long-term planning or maybe planning the goals for the next quarter or for the whole year ahead? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And that's something that we're working through at the moment, actually. Like historically, until 12 months ago, our roadmap was really easy to set because one of the things that we do as a business, this is across the whole business, is we're very hyper focused on our ideal customer. So we pick a very specific customer, which is a commercial builder, people who build schools and hospitals, and they have to be between like 20 and 200 employees, and their size of their workbooks, like the size of the projects that they work on and how many projects they work on every year. So we have a very narrow customer profile, which we look to when we sell. The benefit of that, like there's obviously a drawback in the fact that it narrows down your customer base pretty significantly. But the benefit is all those customers have literally the exact same problem. There's no one being like, oh, I have this weird edge case, because every customer is practically the same. So it's very easy to prioritize your roadmap in that regard. In the early days, every customer's, I need this and I need this and I need this. And you show them the roadmap and they're like, that's exactly what I want. Perfect. But I think as we've grown, now we're at the point where like we tick all of the low-level boxes for the customers. Now the customers, oh, you already do all these things so well. You should do this, or you should do this. So we're starting to get that divergence where we're at a bit of a crossroads and we can go in like one of 3 or 4 different directions, but you can't do all of them. So I guess, yeah, the way that we're tackling that is mainly around the things that matter to us. Like how many customers does the feature benefit, and are those customers our ideal customer profile? Do they fit in our profile? Or maybe if they're on the edge of it, they'll help us grow that customer profile and overall customer base. And the other thing is, have we promised it to someone? There's always deals where you promise something extra to get it over the line. You know, like I've promised this is going to be done by this date. So that one always comes into the planning. But at a high level, the process that we're taking now is each of our 3 product squads has their own individual roadmap where you look pretty far ahead, like a few months ahead, and you're planning in 2-week increments. Like I'm going to spend 2 sprints on this particular feature that we've talked about, but we don't really know too much about it yet. We'll put that on the roadmap for a couple of months away. And then as that gets a bit closer, you're doing like a more in-depth discovery process. You're talking to customers, you're pulling the thread, and you're building a better understanding of that problem that you're trying to solve. So it gets more and more clear as it gets closer, but then you can also keep filling up the backlog with less well-defined ideas. And you can have a quick chat about those and be like, oh, yeah, that's 2 sprints of work, probably, maybe more. And then you just put a spot in the backlog for it, in the roadmap for it in a couple of months. And then as it gets closer, you start to dig in a bit more. And then that's when you have to start shuffling things around. I thought this was only 1 sprint worth of work, but it's actually going to be 3. So now you have to decide, do you push other things back, these other things that you've got behind it, or do you trim the scope of that thing and do you make it so that you only spend 1 sprint on it and you can come back and do another sprint on it later if you want to? And those are the really robust, like kind of product and prioritization discussions that we're having now. And it's really exciting to see that level of planning that's coming into the business now.
I think a lot of what you're saying is built on top of this core philosophy that we need to really move beyond the KPI. Just don't really focus on keeping the lights on. And then everything else simply starts falling into place. How do you decide on the project allocation or the team allocation? Who does what? Because in the early days, the roles are very clear. Okay, you have got this experience, you do this, you got this, you do this. But then as you scale, now there are multiple people with overlapping capabilities. Then how do you decide the allocation for teams and projects to them?
I think our end goal that we're trying to have a sort of empowered team concept where an individual product squad would own a particular part of the product, and then everything to do with that particular part of the product is that team's job, right? So then we can throw ideas and roadmap items at them, and then they can go and talk to the customer about their particular area, and they can manage their own prioritization and that sort of thing, taking inputs from customers and from sales and from customer success and from the founding team and all this sort of stuff. Problem that we're at the moment is we don't have enough product squads to effectively divide up our whole product. Our product is quite large and quite complex. So there's overlapping concerns. And it also just so happens that a lot of the product work coming up in the next 6 to 12 months happens to be in one particular part of the product. And there's a lot of the product that like you just don't really touch as much as well. So it's not as simple as just being like, let's cut it up into thirds and be like, you do that third, you do that third, you do that third, because yeah, you just can't really divide it as easily. Ends up being like a team is generally more practiced in, say, the tendering process when a builder is trying to find a subcontractor to come and lay their concrete or to do the plumbing. They have to go through this whole big tendering process where they get quotes from multiple vendors and they compare them, and then they do an internal approval process to prove that they've done their due diligence and they've picked the right vendor. So we have a team that's, okay, you're the tendering team, and that is a very big part of our product. So you can't handle all of it yourself, but a lot of the really core tendering items that come up, we'll give to that team. And then the other teams have their own areas which they focus on as well, but those areas are a little bit smaller. So they'll often take some of the like tender adjacent tasks as well. It's a difficult thing because it's not like there's no like clear line that you can just be like, all right, that's tendering, that's not tendering. That's like what our product does, is make that whole tendering process easier so that you can find the right subcontractor for the right price. So yeah, it largely does come down to the experience that the teams have, what stuff they've worked on before. And at some point, we'll probably end up like rotating people through teams as well so that they can get exposure to different areas, because otherwise you end up with slightly siloed experiences where someone's got a lot of experience in one path but they don't understand the rest of the product, which is not ideal. But also continuity of work in a single space allows people to build that like expertise in that area as well, so they can do it better and faster than someone who hasn't got experience in that. So it's a bit of a balancing act as well.
And do you think in all of this, being remote or being hybrid or being all of them at one place, does that impact the allocation decisions in any way?
Not for us, because we're fully remote. We don't have any sort of office or hybrid. Everyone works from home, which I quite like. I think it works a lot better for particularly pair programming, where you can share your screen and you can take control of other people's screens to type things or whatever. And then the other bonus that you get out of that is when you do like product workshops or discussions, you can bring up like a digital whiteboard, and as you're writing things down, it's just like immediately documented, and you never end up in this space of sitting in a conference room, someone's drawing on the whiteboard, and then the meeting's over and everyone's like quickly trying to take photos of the whiteboard to remember what it was, but wiped it 3 or 4 times and no one took photos of that halfway through the meeting. You end up with a little bit better documentation as well, but the product discussions that you have are a lot harder remote, because people can go on mute or turn their camera off, or like even just having a discussion with 10 people on a Zoom call is hard, because the minuscule delay that you get makes it hard for people to jump into a gap and say something. Whereas in person, the conversation flows a little bit smoother. So I don't know, to answer your question, it doesn't really play that much of a role to us because everyone's remote. Time zone issues will come up for us at some point, but for the moment, our product team is based on the eastern seaboard of Australia, so everyone's in the same time zone, except for one in New Zealand, and that's only a couple of hours difference. So it's pretty easy to schedule everything in. I think even as our teams grow and we get more geographically dispersed, you'd probably try and keep teams in the same or similar time zones. Otherwise, it will just become hard to work together, if that makes sense. Like scheduling meetings at weird times just doesn't, it's not sustainable. You can do it every now and then, and like we do. Obviously, being a global startup, we've got people in Australia, New Zealand, Philippines, the UK, so there's a lot of calls that happen outside of hours and that sort of thing, but it's just not something you can do every single day to get your job done.
Yes. Nathan, have there been any resources, any blogs or newsletters, any engineering management related courses that could have helped you in this journey, or of leading a team?
I think the biggest one for me is a podcast called Developing Leadership. It's made by the ex-CTO of GitHub and the CEO of Athenian as well, which I imagine is a competitor to Dev Dynamics as well. I've listened to every episode religiously. It's got a lot of really good kind of tips and ideas and just like mental models for how you think about different things as well. Yeah.
Even I've been following that podcast for aspiring tech leaders or maybe people who want to do startup and could be taking on the engineering roles? Is there any advice that you want to give them?
I guess we came today to talk about resourcing and prioritization, right? I like to think of, I don't know the word resourcing, resources, because there's people that you're talking about. So just thinking of people as other people, as human beings is, I think, really key. And I guess one of the quotes or particular parts of that developing leadership podcast that stuck with me was something from somewhere was on, and she was talking about her toddler was at home and she had made him a toasty or something, and she'd cut it into triangles instead of into squares, and he hit his lid, and it was the end of the world that his toasty had been cut into triangles instead of squares. And it's very easy in that situation to dismiss him and be, it's not that big of a deal. It's just triangles, mate. Like, you can still eat it. But if you look at it from his perspective, he's only been alive for 2 years. It's probably one of the biggest things that ever happened in his life. He wanted squares and he got triangles. So it actually really matters to him. And you can draw that same parallel with people in a business, right? If you have a team working on a project that goes for 6 months and then it gets to the end of the 6 months and it's not done yet, and then you scrap the whole thing and say it doesn't matter anymore, those people are going to have some understandably negative feelings about that decision. So that's something you have to keep in mind. In the grand scheme of things, like, the best thing for the business is probably to scrap that project and move on. But these people have put 6 months of their lives into building it, and now they're told that it doesn't really matter. So it's something that you have to keep in mind, like, when you're dealing with people, is that they're people with thoughts and feelings. And if you treat them that way, then they really enjoy working with you and they enjoy their job, and they'll give you a lot more effort than they will if you treat them like numbers on a piece of paper or a resource, for want of a better word. So that's the main thing that I've been trying to focus on over the last few years myself.
That's so thoughtful. You have to really know what's happening around you and create that atmosphere for people to experiment, to express, and create amazing engineering solutions or whatever they're doing. You really have to create that environment where they could do their best.
Yeah, exactly. But
So
yeah,
Nathan, apart from that, I think we did speak about your engineering journey as a whole, but what is Nathan doing beyond engineering? What are the other things that you're involved in? What do you do?
I have a bit of a personality trait where I like to do weird hobbies. I don't like to do many mainstream hobbies, and I have a lot of hobbies. So I play bike polo, which is like you get on a push bike and you ride around on a tennis court and you hit a ball into a net. Yes, but I've never broken anything doing it, so it's fun. Good fun. I take my dogs dog sledding in the forest. Even though there's no snow around here, we tie them in front of a mountain bike and we race them through the forest in the pitch black. That's pretty fun as well.
How many
So
dogs you got?
I've got 2 dogs. I've got a husky and a cattle dog cross. So both working breeds and have a lot of energy. Hence why I got into running them through the forest at nighttime, because otherwise you just can't tire them out. Doesn't matter how much you walk them.
You're getting on a bike, you're doing crazy things, and then you're racing dogs. What's next? What's more to
What's next? Yeah, I don't know. Those are the 2 craziest things that I do. There's a lot of traveling involved in the dog sledding. We have to take our camper and drive for hours and then set up a camper in the middle of the night, sleeping in less than 5-degree weather, and you're trying to like cook your dinner and it's pitch black, and there's a lot of challenges involved in that. But the things that you do, so just to wear your dog out, a bit crazy.
Nathan, thank you so much for taking the time talking to us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the chat today.
Thanks for being with us. Stay tuned for more.